with Jeff Wefferson. Show number 5, the first show of the new year 2013. At least that's what we call it, using the traditional Gregorian calendar. Good old Pope's calling for a new world order, just like Hitler did, and George Bush. So I reckon if they're calling for a new world order, it's time for the really cool people in the world, the people of one heart, according to the Hopi prophecy. It's time for the people of one heart to really not just talk about going to the next level, but actually making the most maximum effort that we can to actually go to the next level, because who knows how much time we actually have. When we're out of time, all that's left is eternity, and so we're always in eternity all the time. I like to tell people when they talk about they'd like to travel in time, I go like, well, but we are traveling in time. And they go like, well, we need to go to space. And I go, but we're already in space. Think about it. The Earth's in space. Space is big. And so they go like, oh, I've run out of time. And I go like, yeah, but we're in eternity right now. This is eternity. We're in it. Anyway, that was the topic from a previous show, Lost in Time. I'd like to thank Jules Stanley and all the people at UCY TV for making this possible and for their ongoing and concerted efforts to bring some high-quality information and awareness activism to the people out there. And to me, it's not important the number of people that are listening to this, because probably more people are going to listen to me through the archived recording of this show that they can listen to whenever they want, rather than hearing it live. But the important thing is the vibe, the intent, the power of the message that's being broadcast out into the collective noosphere of Mothership Gaia, of which each of our central nervous system, ultimate technology, reality management systems that we call I, 7 billion of those, are all equally important in terms of creating the reality that we're manifesting on this planet right now. This show is going to mark the beginning of what's probably going to be my major theme for this whole coming year. It's probably going to be the basic topic of the next several shows. I'm going to be talking about the whales and dolphins, the cetaceans. That's Cetaceans, cetaceans. Cetaceans are the completely waterborne marine mammals. There's a word called pelagic, P-E-L-A-G-I-C, that means the waterborne marine mammals, as opposed to other ones that don't live in the water all the time. I'm not sure what the word for that is. But anyway, the whales and dolphins they're cetaceans, and we're primates. This is both under the class Mammalia. Now, here on this first show, I'm not going to go into too much zoological information. We'll save that for later. I just wanted to sort of give an introduction to the whole reason why I've been very interested in these extremely advanced beings for many decades, and sort of lay out the basic ground plan of approach to telling the story of who they are and why people are interested in them and why we love them, but even though we don't really understand why. They have this magical attraction. Explore some of these things, explore what the real threats to them are, as opposed to the threats that most people think of when they think of mass media and the environmental organizations out there always soliciting money for saving the whales. But the whales and dolphins are, to me, the highest beings on this planet. They've been here tens of millions of years longer than anything resembling Homo sapiens. And in terms of the neurobiological hardware that we deem necessary for advanced consciousness, creativity, awareness, high-level perception, memory, advanced communication, social systems, all the attributes that Homo sapiens, i.e. man the wise, likes to crown himself with and put himself on the pinnacle above and beyond everybody else on this planet. Well, think again, because the whales and dolphins in general have not only everything that we have that we think is required to make us human, but they've got even more of it and better of it. Sort of the most basic idea, if you want to understand where I'm coming from in terms of my relationship with the whales and dolphins, is that it's really like trying to understand and communicate with them and respect them. It's the exact same idea as what astronomers and space enthusiasts have always talked about as the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. There was a group at NASA, well, until they got defunded by NASA, and then they became a private organization called SETI, S-E-T-I, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Now, this was actually born back in the 1960s, I think, with a meeting of scientists called Project Ozma that had Dr. Carl Sagan, Dr. Frank Drake, Bernie Oliver, who was the founder of Hewlett-Packard, Heinz von Forster, I think a mathematician, really top-level guys, a guy named Dr. John C. Lilly, a neurobiologist who was working with dolphins, and it was his work that I got exposed to when I was a freshman in college. My physics lab instructor turned me on to some John Lilly books, and it really rang some very strong chords deep within me, so much so that I quit college and moved to California the next year to get involved with his dolphin communication group. It was a very, very profound spiritual cosmic calling that I felt in me then and to this day. I still feel this very deep drive to explore who these beings actually are. What I might actually do is read a little bit from an article that I wrote that was published in Uncensored magazine in the last issue. I believe it was the September to December issue of 2012, not the current issue on the stands, but the one before that. The article is entitled, "We Are Not Alone Yet: How We Are Waging War on a True Extraterrestrial Intelligence." Modern man believes that he is alone in the universe, yet nothing could be further from the truth. The mindset of civilized Western humanity takes for granted that our collective worldview, the human perspective on life on Earth, represents the pinnacle of awareness, the paragon of intelligence, that we are sine pari, that is, without equal in the kingdoms of life, above and apart from mere animals and other lower life forms. This unquestioned anthropocentric meta-belief, the central pillar supporting the dominant DMOE, or distributed mental operating environment, which facilitates our fundamentally Judeo-Christian, neo-Darwinian, military-industrial capitalist way of life, justifies ecocide, rationalizes genocide, glorifies predation, rewards greed, derides simplicity, denies indigenous and alternative modes of being, and is conducting a full-spectrum jihad, or holy war, against life itself. We have never been alone. In the same way that we needn't go into space because we're already there, how could we not be? We've never been alone because our true family is the universe, which, as currently conceived, may host not only a very broad spectrum of beings, intelligences, and forms of consciousness, of far greater diversity, improbability, and unknowability than the sum of all science fiction, but is intelligent and conscious in and of itself. Our nearest star, the Sun, Sol, is a powerful stellar being in intelligence. Mothership Earth, or Gaia, is herself an astronomically complex planetary being in intelligence. The union of Father Sky and Mother Earth gives birth to life as we know her, a vast creative and experimental intelligence based on DNA, carbon compounds, and water, who manifests herself as an endless expression of living art information. Every being, every form of life is by nature intelligent in its own way. Humanity seems to be an anomaly on this planet. We are the only species among billions who have run amok and are actively destroying our home, as well as the only species who is embedded in collective hallucination, harboring destructive delusions about our own alleged and superior intelligence and other chosen species fantasies. The cetaceans, the whales and dolphins, have lived in the ocean of Earth for tens of millions of years, according to our consensus model of time, and represent a vast superhuman intelligence akin to our own in fundamental ways, yet truly alien beyond comparison in equally fundamental ways. They have been here 10 times longer than we have, with neurobiological internal technology far in advance of ours, living in far greater harmony with the more supportive and protective environment they inhabit. The breadth, depth, and quality of their reality, their experience and management of dimensions we refer to as time, space, awareness, memory, and knowledge may exceed ours by several orders of magnitude. Their inner life is a vast unknown to us. If and when we become capable of comprehension, we may find their reality to be far more expansive, far more beautiful than anything we pretend to access. Mainstream humanity is fascinated by cetaceans, but the attraction is hard to define. Cetaceans are big business these days, particularly in mass media and the eco-green movement. We like to listen to their songs. We love to watch them on nature documentaries and or whale watching tours, or even swim with them in dolphin encounter groups. We recoil in horror at the sight of a harpoon gun-wielding Japanese whaler and instantly pull out our credit cards and activate the Donate Now buttons on the websites of an ever-growing number of Save the Whales organizations. We do this almost instinctively. We are eager to free them from captivity and want them to have the same rights as people, or pay environmental organizations to do this for us. The latter option is a little more convenient for most people, plus it's a tax write-off. Whales and dolphins are literary and pop culture heroes or even celebrities. Moby Dick, Flipper, Willie, Migaloo, the list goes on. We like to give them names, but what do they call themselves? In general, we love them, but we can't explain why. We are shocked by the barbarity of whaling. We think that it's a shame when a pod washes up on a remote beach. The causes are written off as a mystery. We think of them as beautiful or magnificent creatures, possibly even intelligent, of course, but not nearly as intelligent as we are. Homo sapiens is not about to disenthrone himself as the overlord of creation, not without a fight anyway. To fight this good fight is one of the purposes of this article. How can we possibly save the whales when we are not only not even trying to save ourselves, much less our fellow beings or our planet, but putting the pedal of our technological juggernaut to the metal? How can we possibly believe that we are somehow intelligent when the obvious result of civilization is wanton destruction of the earth, including ourselves? How can we possibly hope to communicate with a vast non-human consciousness when our own reality is riddled with acute, chronic delusion and radical contradiction, when as a whole we have little or no understanding of our own psychological processes? My primary purpose in this article is not only to disenthrone man from the apex of megalomania, but more significantly to explore who the cetaceans are as fellow sentient beings, at least our equal, but more than likely light years ahead, what the real global threats to their well-being actually are, and the implications of this awareness, the danger and the revelation. The best way to do this will be to look at the mainstream beliefs and assumptions in the popular mind and to contrast this with what I believe to be a much more enlightened, informed, and realistic appraisal. This article can only be an introductory map or outline and hopefully a source of inspiration. It cannot possibly encompass all the dimensions of knowledge, research, and imaginative speculation necessary even to begin this journey of journeys, whose destination is no less than the unknown and possibly unknowable nature of life, the universe, and everything, of who we are. Western man looks to the stars, hoping that someday he will discover, or be contacted by, beings from space, who will teach him the secrets of the universe and rescue him from the karma of the ages. The psychological foundation of this impulse is more religious escapism than spiritual quest, looking out there instead of here and now, around and within. Modern man's long loneliness, mourned by naturalist Lauren Isley, is no more than his alienation from nature, a self-imposed delusion, more accurately termed a long blindness, a long ignorance which has precluded our awareness and understanding of and relationship with not only all living beings including our planet, but in particular a true extraterrestrial intelligence, or TETI, here and now, inhabiting a separate reality on Mothership Earth, not our saviors, but our teachers and friends. That beings far in advance of us have lived on the same planet far longer than we have is a huge leap for the mainstream Western mentality and is likely to be met with great cognitive resistance. If this is true, they might say, why haven't they contacted or conquered us? Where are their cities, their factories, their armies, their advanced technologies, their science of intelligence, of civilization? Where is it? One of the biggest differences between the mindset of modernized humans and traditional indigenous people is that modern folk tend to think of themselves and their civilization as being somehow above, more advanced than, or having conquered the natural world, whereas indigenous people have a little more humility and a sense of the sacredness of the earth, a respect for that which they do not profess to understand, much less control. The modern scientific paradigm fragments and reduces nature to forces and resources to be subdued, harnessed, and exploited. Indigenous cosmologies, viewed as backward by civilized man, are holistic yet pragmatic, striving not for control or material wealth, but for the ability to survive, to live in harmony with the earth, with all our relations, mitakaye oyasin. Civilized humanity has lost track of the fact that highly developed social systems, even culture, can thrive in the absence of manipulation of the material world. Using our best knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence, not only to try to communicate with and truly listen to or understand the messages from the vast Teti, true extraterrestrial intelligence that the cetaceans truly are, but also to become aware of how the only threats to their well-being originate in human activity, seems to me to be one of the most important endeavors we can put our energy into. In many ways, the cetaceans can be seen as ourselves in the future, not the future we are currently creating, but a possible future in which we've returned to the womb of nature and remembered who we really are and reclaimed our true spiritual nature, one that they never lost. At this time, we're on the verge of rendering the entire biosphere of our planet uninhabitable by life as we know her, including the cetaceans and ourselves. This path, this work may be our best hope for harmonious renavigation of the human process. That was part one, or actually the introduction to my article called We Are Not Alone Yet, How We Are Waging War on a True Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I won't read the rest of the article now, but if you go online on my blog, which is tutunuiwananga.blogspot.com, I'll spell it TUTUNI-WANANGA.blogspot.com, tutunuiwananga.blogspot.com. Go to there and you'll find a wealth of information about everything pertaining to the whales and dolphins. Haven't posted anything on there really recently, but there's a lot of really valuable information on there, particularly state-of-the-art information about what the real global threats to their well-being are in terms of military-industrial activity. But if you go to the month of August in the archive, August of 2012, you'll find this article in its entirety archived there. The version that was printed and uncensored had about 75% of this article, but John Eisen edited out some of the more sort of mainstream zoological stuff just to get it to fit into the magazine. But I would really like to thank him, John Eisen, editor of Uncensored Magazine, for his unfailing support to my information activism. And I've got a slot waiting, and the deadline is January 15th for the new issue. And so I'm going to have a massive article in there. It's going to be a 4-part freelance intelligence report update, and one of the sections is going to be the current state of the art about the whales and dolphins. Just while I'm talking about it, there's a brilliant source of information. It's called Stranded No More. This is run by a friend of mine named Wade Carson, who's a Canadian marine biologist. Wade has taken all this time out of his important research to do this blog. But Stranded No More, strandednomore.blogspot No, I'm sorry. strandednomore.wordpress.com, and also on Facebook, Stranded No More. So this is probably the state-of-the-art information that's updated much more often than I'm sort of able to. But Wade is able to sort of track strandings of whales and dolphins all around the planet, and you wouldn't believe how many are happening all the time. And almost without exception, every single time that whales or dolphins strand, it's military and or industrial activity is detected or known to have been taking place within the vicinity. But yeah, read that whole article. What I just read was the introduction, but the next part, which is really in-depth, it's called Who Are the Cetaceans? And then this is the different subtopics under there, which I'll probably end up reading this whole article on this show, but in bits and pieces. But under Who Are the Cetaceans, some of the areas that I'll talk about are living in water. So in that section I contrast what it means to be a conscious being that lives in water as opposed to on land. Their relationship with gravity, ability to self-locomote in 3 different dimensions. Very, very significant differences. What it's like surrounded by water all the time as opposed to air. Also in terms of the protection that water gives you from energetic emanations coming from space and the sun, ultraviolet rays, cosmic rays. The next section is primates versus cetaceans. We're primates. They're cetaceans, but we're both mammals. They breathe air just like we do, only they breathe voluntarily. They do not have autonomic breathing like we do, which is another really fundamental difference. I mean, imagine if you had to consciously take a breath. How would you sleep? But so they spend most of their time underwater or at the surface. So they obviously don't breathe while they're underwater. They actually hold their breath for a really long time. Some of the larger whales, like sperm whales, I think they're called cachalots. I think they can hold their breath for up to an hour or more. I mean, imagine that, not breathing for an hour. It's got to be a completely different consciousness than what we have as human beings, assuming this is just for the few people that do have consciousness. Then the next section is hands versus flippers. Now imagine having the greater or equal brain power to what we have, consciousness, creativity, but you don't have hands. So what do? There you go. We're trying to explore who these guys actually are. They've been here a lot longer than us, on the same planet, only in the ocean, which is much, much more of the Earth, both on the surface and in terms of cubic volume. They've been here tens of millions of years longer than our most distant ancestors, and they're still here now, and they haven't hurt the Earth or caused themselves to mutate or anything. But look at what we've done just in the blink of an eye, and we crown ourselves as the paragon of intelligence. If that's not evidence of acute schizophrenia or a species megalomania, I don't know what is. The next section, seeing with sound, talking with music. Now you're probably familiar with how the whales and dolphins use echolocation, where they send out bursts of sound, and they don't send out sound through their mouth. They don't have a nose, and they have a blowhole, but they breathe through it, but they don't send out sound, although dolphins can do a pretty good job of squeakily mimicking human voices through their blowhole, but that's sort of like us talking through our nose. I mean, imagine if you could try to talk through your nose, what that would sound like, if you could even do it. So anyway, they're able to sort of see with sound and talk with music. So they've got extremely advanced systems of communication, but they do not use language. Their systems of communication have information densities and complexity greater than human language, but it's not language because language is specific to humans, because language comes from the word for tongue. Dolphins and whales have tongues, but they don't use them for making sound. Then the next section is called Brains, Minds, and Reality Management. So this relates to my concept of the ultimate technology, how this is central to our whole existence as human beings. I don't care who you are, what you do, what country you live in, what your job is, what your beliefs are. No matter what, even if you're evil or good, the Pope, Obama, Ray Kurzweil, any of these people, doesn't matter what you're doing. Your brain and mind and your reality management systems are of utmost importance for you to understand, because that is the hard and software by means of which you do everything else. This is what I've been talking about with the understanding, the necessity of our understanding our own psychological processes. This is the crux of the whole problem, the massive full spectrum war of problems that humanity is creating for itself and everybody else on this planet, and including the planet. It has to do with our own lack of understanding of our own psychological processes, that we're using this every second. You're using your brain and mind right now to listen to what I'm saying, or whatever else it is that you might be doing too. So our problem is not with our biology, it's with our software. Our basic beliefs and attitudes and fundamental values and stuff, that it's our whole mental operating environment has become so mutated, warped, and distorted and synthetic. It used to be that our reality was nature, but now most people live in a more almost totally synthetic environment. So it's like artificial creativity and artifacts and images and sounds and information that's not natural, but it's of human origin. It's constantly feeding back into our senses, which were not really designed to process stuff that we created ourselves. We're designed to process the energy and information of nature. That's why we're not designed to live in environments with microwaves or with genetically engineered Franken bugs. I won't call it food. With these chemicals, with synthetic radionuclides, we're not designed. We're beautifully designed and adapted to live and function in nature in a non-electric environment. That's where your senses really open up and you realize who and what you are. Living out in nature without any electricity would be a very good first step if you want to sort of understand what it's like to be a whale and dolphin, I think. Then the next to the last section under Who Are the Cetaceans is Cetacean Misconceptions. And we'll talk about that later. Then the last section is Animals versus People, because what are we animals? Or can other beings, can animals be people too? And what does it mean to be a person? And I've been saying this for many, many years now. I don't think that most people could actually qualify as being people anymore using the standard definition of what it's traditionally meant to be a human being for hundreds of years in Western civilization. We don't really fit that criteria anymore. Our beliefs and attitudes and motivations and behaviors have mutated and gone so far off the course of what I think it really means to be a human being that taken as a whole, the inhabitants of modern civilization would not truly classify as being people. The next big section after Who Are the Cetaceans is called Cetacean Holocaust, the real global threats. Now, and this is the difficult part of this article, because it's not fun to delve into all this stuff. Contrary to popular belief, the Japanese whalers and the fishermen at Taiji killing the dolphins and stuff, they're the ones getting all the bad press and being fingered and nailed as the evil whale-killing bastards of the world. And people in the public imagination, thanks to people like Captain Paul Watson as the Sea Shepherd and Louis Saihoyos of the Cove, these people have promulgated this vision of the evil Japanese whalers as being the single biggest threat to whales around the world. And sure, whaling is barbaric. It's like murdering fellow beings. But at the same time, when the U.S. military goes in and blows up whole towns in like Libya or Syria or whatever, of dozens of other countries, do we go out and give money to a Save the Humans organization? No. So it's really weird that all this stuff. The real global threats are actually from human military-industrial activity, specifically a lot of sort of military sonars of different types and intensities, and also seismic testing for hydrocarbons, of which there's probably hundreds of these geophysical exploration vessels in operation at any given time around the world. They use, now the military technologies are quite diverse, and who knows what all they've got now. We sort of talked about some of this stuff with the interview I did with Peter Eyre a couple of weeks ago, investigative journalist who used to be in the British Navy, worked for oil and mining companies, and he worked for NATO. So he knows about a lot of this stuff. His information's a little dated, but even then, he told us a lot of scary stuff. The seismic testing and low-frequency active sonar both use giant transducers that are towed down as arrays under the water, and a single blast from one of these can emit a shock wave of up to 30,000 joules. This information is from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, who are one of the world's leading experts in seismic testing. They're also basically a subsidiary of the U.S. Navy, as is about 95% of all marine biology researchers in the world. So anyway, this is really hard because people have a hard time of going like, well, but our Navy, our military's good. We need them out there to protect us from the evil Al-Qaeda submarines that might be getting ready to nuke our banks and stuff, because they hate our freedom, because we've brought freedom and democracy to all these countries like Iraq and Libya and Afghanistan, and we want to bring freedom and democracy to Iran so bad, but they just won't let us. And we need the military to be strong, because otherwise those Al-Qaeda would sneak up, and bin Laden might come back from the dead and come and blow us up while we're asleep. And so people have a hard time realizing that the U.S. military has been beefed up, co-opted, and engineered and controlled in the exact same way that the military-industrial machine of the Third Reich, that is Nazi Germany, was used, manipulated, and funded by the exact same backers, the Wall Street and London bankers, financial interests. The U.S. is now the Nazi Germany of today, and it's being used to do the same thing, only with 60 years more advanced technology, to take over the world, to go and get any resource or land or anything that these people want. But the whole war on terror is just a hoax, just like the war on climate change is a hoax. They're all designed to get people to support what they want to do, which is really about taking over the world, creating a global totalitarian one-world government. And the whales and dolphins are paying a massive price, because between all the amount of this military activity that's going on, war games, the testing of these weapon systems, I mean, who knows what all they've got. And if you think about it, a system like HARP, which can communicate with submarines anywhere in the world by broadcasting these extremely low-frequency waves down through the ocean, this has to be extremely detrimental to all the whales and dolphins. And you also couple in the extreme amount of biochemical and radiological contamination of the entire ocean. Like, I mean, look at all the stuff coming out of Fukushima. The Pacific Ocean is fucked. Absolutely fucking fucked with 2,000 synthetic radionuclides. Nobody is able to actually tell the truth about how much is there, even if they wanted to, and nobody wants to. It's too complex and too much, and it's constantly coming out. I mean, it's a horror nightmare. The whales and dolphins live in the ocean. And so between all the noise, between all the radiation and all the chemicals, and all the testing of these weapons, the disposal of radioactive waste, collisions with ships, I think that it's possible that the cetaceans might have a syndrome similar to what we call Alzheimer's disease in people, where they sort of are able to go around and sort of basically function, but they're sort of not really there. They kind of like their minds go. They lose their memory. They forget who they are. They walk, go to the bathroom in the closet and stuff like that. And it's possible, just possible, that cetaceans may be coming down with a syndrome like this, where they don't physically look unhealthy, but they're mentally disturbed. And see, this is another big chasm that we aren't able to bridge, or we can't directly communicate with them in a way that we think is important for an intelligent being to communicate. We're so locked into our own reality, and we think that if it can't speak to us in English, then it's not intelligent. And we're the ones who are deluded. This is another big aspect of this whole research project, and this whole idea that I'm trying to get across to everybody, to understand the limitations are in us, not in the cetaceans, in us. Then the next section is called "We Are the Problem," and then after that, who they really are, their message, our lesson. The article wraps up with a section called "Passengers and Crew of Mothership Earth," and I conclude with, we feel that their basic message to us now, even though they have access to dimensions of cosmic awareness and knowledge of whole dimensions of consciousness that we can't even comprehend. I mean, it's like it would be invisible to us, or it would be noise or gibberish or something. But their message to us right now, from cetaceans to humanity, is loud and clear and simple. Live simply so that others may simply live. Live simply so that others may simply live. That makes a lot of sense when you really think about it, because how much of the stuff that the typical person of today, how much of the stuff they have do they really need? I mean, everybody has to ask that question for themselves, but I know that it's possible to do without probably the vast majority of all consumer goods and physical objects and possessions and stuff that are so important to most people. Stuff that people will spend their whole lives doing a job they hate just to get the money so they can buy all this stupid stuff. They're obsessed with it. Our whole mentality is obsessed with the material world, and not with functional stuff like really cool musical instruments or things that do really cool stuff, but just bullshit like giant houses and furniture and stupid cars and like the most ridiculous kind of like, oh my God. But a mentality. See, the problem is us. We're the ones living in our own self-created delusion of apathy and ignorance and denial, and at the same time self-aggrandizing ourselves to be the pinnacle of creation. We're above everybody else on this planet. This is the basic attitudes that we walk around with. And this mentality has absolutely no humility whatsoever when it comes to understanding our real place on this planet. It's a nightmare of our mentality, and the scariest part is that it's not even questioned. Most people, well, I can't say most people because there's 7 billion, they say, and I've only met a few thousand, but so most people I have met don't seem to be interested or motivated in analyzing or critiquing their own day-to-day process, or looking within to analyze what drives them, what motivates them. But to do this is the essential step that we must take as people to actually make an effort to go to the next level. Because if we don't, we're just going to dwindle down into a morass of mutated frankenplasm. Because that's what's happening. 2012 has come and gone. The aliens didn't land. Jesus didn't come. We didn't blow ourselves up. The Pope's calling for a new world order, but who knows what's going to happen. Nothing has changed. So what do? We just like sit here keep on consuming our bullshit, trying to get as much money as we can, thinking that where are we going to go on our next holiday? Everything's fine. That's what the people in Nazi Germany thought when they were walking down the street. They thought it was the best times of their lives because they were totally in this state of denial about what their country was doing. How many people in America are aware that their military is their country is the Nazi Germany of today? Only it's astronomically worse than anything Nazi Germany ever did because the technologies are so much more advanced. The Nazis didn't have depleted uranium. Oh my God. They didn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't have television. They didn't have genetic engineering. They didn't have, microwaves were just coming into being during the Third War and radar and stuff, but my God. I mean, probably one legion of fully armed Marines could do more damage than the whole Nazi German army in terms of the firepower, the ability to blow shit up and kill and create genomic instability in whole populations. So the technology has advanced so far that soon we won't even need people to fight. I mean, there won't be fighting. All there will be is dying and killing done by machines. And it's rapidly moving in that direction. It's a horrific nightmare. And we aren't the only beings who matter on this planet. We act like that we are. Another thing I talk about in my article, you have to understand this is a huge, huge area of research that we're talking about here, of trying to understand fellow beings whose consciousness is actually beyond ours. Again, this is a generalization because we're only one species of primate people. Cetaceans, on the other hand, there's hundreds of them. So, in other words, the equivalent would be as if there was not only just Homo sapiens, but also, say for example, Neanderthal and several dozen or 100 other beings that were very similar to us but different. You know, say like is different between an orca and a dolphin, or as similar or different between an orca and a sperm whale. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's an asymmetry there. Nothing that's very close to us exists on the land. The closest thing to human beings is chimpanzees, and look at how different they are. So I think it's commonly agreed upon that Homo sapiens has killed off everything else that was even remotely close to itself, because I don't know why, because it was like competition or something like that, or maybe it was just the urge to kill that which is like you. And now, I mean, we're doing a pretty good job of killing ourselves, and so we're fucked up in the head as a species, big time. But it's not our biology. I keep saying that. It's not our biology, it's our software. And I don't know if it's our human nature, but it's certainly the mental operating environment that we're operating on right now. The whole endeavor of trying to understand the whales and dolphins as fellow beings encompasses just about every possible avenue of thought, every possible field of study or research. It's everything. It's really the ultimate cosmic philosophical quest, because ultimately it involves understanding or trying to understand, or eventually coming up against the fact that we don't understand or even know ourselves and who or what we really are. And until we understand ourselves much better, there's absolutely no way that we can hope to understand other beings. And see, this is what was so interesting about what Dr. John Lilly thought back in the 1960s when he was part of the Project Ozma, and he was the only biologist there with a bunch of radio astronomers and astrophysicists and stuff like Dr. Carl Sagan. Lilly's basic idea was that And see, all these other scientists, they were talking about they were looking for contact from out there, like with Jodie Foster and stuff. The whole idea of extraterrestrial intelligence, their definition was that extraterrestrial means that it's not from planet Earth, from out there somewhere in space, other planets, other galaxies, other dimensions, other universes perhaps, or maybe the past or future. But anyway, extraterrestrial intelligence. But Lilly was the only biologist there, and his idea makes so much sense because he goes like, look, there's these beings here with bigger brains than ours, just as highly evolved, just as complex, if not more so. They've got all the neurological hardware that we have. Every single thing that we think makes us human, they have, only more of it, but it's just different. And so, and they've been on the same planet as us far longer than we have. So if we can't understand or respect or communicate with them, beings that are from the same planet as us, how is it even remotely possible that we're going to be able to understand, respect, or communicate with, much less even perceive or be aware that they're there, of beings that aren't even from this planet or from other dimensions or something like that? And he sort of nailed the whole thing because, it makes perfect sense. How can we expect to understand anybody that's not even from here if we can't even respect and stop killing the most highly evolved beings that are on our planet? Our whole reality is riddled with psychotic delusion. All the stuff you see on TV and mass media and the movies about aliens, they're all sort of mutated humanoid-looking things with growths on their faces. This is just a grotesque distortion, a projection of a dark side of the human unconscious and all this imagery is possibly being wielded as a weapon of psychological warfare as part of our own species karma, because our own most advanced weapon systems, of which television is the most advanced, are aimed at ourselves right now. And so this is the nightmare that we're creating. And it's really bad karma for us to continue killing the whales and dolphins, the most advanced, beautiful, special friends that we ever had on this whole planet, through our own ignorance of thinking that the Japanese whalers are killing them all, when one blast from a seismic testing vessel or one blast from a Navy LFA sonar, one blast can kill as many whales or dolphins as the Japanese whaling fleet would kill an entire season. Yes, this whole endeavor of understanding the whales and dolphins is huge, and I personally think that it's the most important avenue of research that anyone can be pursuing right now, because in doing so, it's helping us to understand who we are. By trying to understand them, it points us right out to the areas in which we need to understand ourselves better. And that's happening with me. It's very transformative, and it's very powerful to realize that we're all in touch with each other mentally all the time through the Schumann resonance of Mother Earth and the frequencies of vibration of our consciousness in the noosphere. All human minds are connected with all other human minds and all the minds of all the beings, and Mother Earth herself. All the whales and dolphins are particularly powerful telepathic transmitters. So I think that as humans, at least in our relatively undisrupted natural state before the dawn of electrical technology, when we were still relatively undisrupted technologically, our collective psyche has been in connection with or resonance with the psyche of the whales and dolphins the whole time we've existed. They would have been here before us. So our whole mentality has evolved in contact with them. But I think that ours has become mutated or cyclically mutated, perhaps a state of permanent psychic mutation may be what we exist in. Because we live on the land, we're much more subject to being influenced by energies coming from outside the earth, whereas the whales and dolphins, spending most of their time under the water, are much more protected from these energetic influences that, in the words of Immanuel Velikovsky, would be the causative factors of cataclysmic evolution. So what I'll do for the last few minutes of this program, episode number 5, On the Brink with Jeff Wefferson here on UCY TV. This is January 1st, 2013. I'll just give you a little background of my early interest in whales and dolphins and how I've come to be where I am now. Like I was saying before, I first became aware of them because my physics lab instructor in college turned me on to some books by a scientist named John C. Lilly, and his books really struck a very powerful chord with me. And it had to do with an experience I had when I was 12. It was in July of whatever year that was, and my dad had given me this little book about astronomy, and it somehow inspired me to go out and look at the stars. And I went out in this backyard one summer night, and I looked up and looked at some stars, and just all of a sudden it was as if, I don't know, something came down and touched me, not physically but spiritually. Some kind of awareness, just it was like a little wand going ka-ching. And it was like my eyes are open, or my crown chakra or something was opened, and I just became aware of the universe and how vast and magical and mystical it was, and like somebody's there. And I don't know if you'd call it a religious experience or something, but it changed me forever. And ever since then, I wanted to be an astronomer. And so when I got to college, I realized that astronomers don't look at the stars; they do math and all this stuff. And so, but then the connection happened with Dr. Lilly's work with the dolphins and about them being an extraterrestrial intelligence and stuff, which extraterrestrial literally means away from land. It doesn't mean away from the earth, it means away from land. So they are a true extraterrestrial intelligence. So learning about Dr. Lilly's work really resonated on that same frequency that had been my interest in astronomy. So much so that I sort of started doing a lot of research about brains and minds. At that time, I was still interested in finishing college. I decided I was going to go to medical school and be a psychiatrist, which my guardian angels weren't going to have any of that. But so anyway, about a year or two later, I actually went out to California and did a workshop with John Lilly and his wife Tony at a place called the Esalen Institute, which was this kind of freaky place in Big Sur. And I got naked around other people for the first time in the hot tub, and I also quit wearing underwear there because I heard these two dudes say like, "Hey, I gave up wearing underwear," and I thought about it and go like, I don't really need underwear. So I consciously gave up underwear at the Esalen Institute. Anyway, it was a very transformative experience. John Lilly and his wife were really cool people. They liked me, and they actually. When I moved to California 2 years later, they asked me to write an article on their behalf for the Whale and Dolphin issue of Magical Blend magazine. This was in December 1980. You can read this article in its entirety on my blog, Tutsunui Wanaga. It's called Man and Dolphin. So that was quite an honor to have one of the top scientists in the world asked me to write an article on their behalf, and when he proofread it, there wasn't any changes that he wanted to make or anything. So that was pretty cool for someone who was 24 at the time. Anyway, so then I was living in California, and the Lillys were embarking on a new phase of their dolphin research that was going to involve keeping a pair of dolphins captive for a year while developing the necessary computer, hard, and software so that they could do real-time frequency transformations of their sound and then go and work with free-swimming ones in the ocean. So Lilly had captive dolphins in the Virgin Islands before, but he let them go when he realized that he thought he was running a concentration camp for them, when he really realized who they were. So now he was going to get some new dolphins and keep them captive for a little bit. And I happened to be there on the lab at the day that the two dolphins arrived, Joe and Rosie. Came from Gulfport, Mississippi. They were jumping out of the water all the time and really happy. And so about a month later, they invited me over to go swimming with them. Now, this wasn't the first time that I actually met dolphins. The first time I met some was actually at a place called Quinlan Marine Attractions, which was in a neighboring town to where I grew up in North Carolina. Unbeknownst to me, my whole life, I'd lived within about 80 miles of the largest number of dolphins in captivity in the United States for a long time. He had over 25 dolphins there. And so I got in touch with this guy and went over there, and it was kind of awkward. I just wanted to meet his dolphins. And I mean, like, to this guy, they were just like these animals that he had. But it made me really sad because they were in a shed with no windows, with these swimming pools in it, but it was basically dark and stuffy. And they didn't seem happy. There was a big mother dolphin and her little baby. And it was, oh my God, it was so cool. It was so special. Just feeling their energy. It was just, I can't explain the magic of feeling the energy of a dolphin for the first time. But I also felt their sadness. I felt the sadness of the mother because she, I don't know, I guess because she was captive and she knew what their fate was. And they were just so silent, but you can hear them breathing. Very, very quiet, peaceful beings. And I went and I bent down and put my hand down in the water, and the young dolphin came over to me, and it was a girl. And I swear to God, this little girl dolphin had the energy of like a 16-year-old chick. It was like a teenage girl in the body of a dolphin. And just the energy of her eyes, and you could feel it was like a person. And I put my hand down in there and rubbed her belly and stuff, and it was just a very, 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 very special connection. And it touched me and changed me for the whole rest of my life to experience the magic as well as the sadness of dolphins in captivity. Well, that's about it for episode number 5 of On the Brink with Jeff Wefferson. Thanks for listening here on UCY TV. Tune in again next week or listen to the archive. I've got a new blog page on my blog called Renavigating the Human Process that tells about all of my radioactivity. So check that out. Check out all the previous 4 shows. Please let me know what you think of this if you're checking it out. Any interesting feedback or subjects to talk about. But like I said, I'm going to be focusing on the whales and dolphins for the next several shows and tell you more about our Beyond film that we're working on. Remember, the message of the whales and dolphins, as we perceive it, is live simply so that others may simply live. Signing off. See you next week.
Yeah. Check.